All right, everybody. I think we are going to get started. I am Jillian Laine. I'm the author of the 1 week old Henry Tudor Must Die. Thank you. And I don't know how this happened, but I've sort of made my personality apparently that it took me a really long time to get this book published. And so I am here to chat with you guys today about getting out of the query trenches and getting what took me about 12 years, a 2 book deal. So my background, just to start, my first job out of college was as a production editor at Sourcebooks, which is one of the wonderful publishing companies that publishes across all types of genres. And that's sort of an entry level spot, which was where I began. And I worked my way up to being an acquisitions editor, which is the person that acquires the book. So I thought I knew everything that there was to know about this business and that it would be a really easy path and that I would get there in no time. Clearly, I did not, but I did learn a few things along the way. I took a couple detours from there. I started working in public relations for a little while. I was the director of the National Writers Series, and then I now work as a newspaper editor. So I've sort of seen a lot of the different sides of the writing and publishing world. So hopefully I can bring some of that to you. And there's my pretty new book, My Baby There. And then book two, we will be announcing the title and the cover hopefully in September this year. So really excited for that to come. And before I get started, I know there was actually already a question in the audience from LB. So if you want to just ask your question real quick, and then I will dive into a whole bunch of slides for everybody.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I don't like to come and go, but we have an ill daughter we now have to go home for. So here's my question. After you got an agent, okay, how long did it take for your book to be published?
Sure. So the question, if you couldn't hear, was after I got an agent, how long did it take for the book to be published? So I got my agent in January of 2025, and the book came out July 2026. So about 18 months, which is actually pretty fast in the publishing world. It usually takes 2+ years. So I was really lucky that the stars sort of aligned and there were openings in my publisher's schedule and that we got yeses really quickly along the way. So there, I'm a little bit of an anomaly, but I would say a normal range is usually about 2 to 2.5 years. Yeah. Yeah, everything in publishing moves very slowly until it doesn't, until the book's on sale, and then it's very, very fast and exciting. So I'll start us off. Yeah, absolutely. I'll start us off just sort of telling you a little bit about that version of my story. So I always wanted to write since I was 5 years old. There are videos of me claiming I will be an author. All of my diaries say that will be true, except for when I wanted to be Harriet the Spy. And I got really mad when my parents wouldn't call me Harriet. So that was a whole different section of life. But I started writing for real in about 2012, and I knew I had to write a couple of novels to practice because if you've never written one before, it is not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's a slog, but it is something that you have to sit down and do every day for a lot of days in a row. And some days you don't feel excited to do that. Sometimes you don't feel that creative spark. And so it can be a challenge, and it was one of the reasons why I knew I wanted to practice doing it. So I wrote 2 practice novels, neither of which were very good, neither of which anyone will ever read besides probably, I think my husband read them, and that is about it. I wrote a third one, and then on the third one, that was when I started querying. And I got some nice rejections, like, okay, this is interesting, maybe send us something again. And then on the fourth book, I actually almost got there. I had a revise and resubmit to a publisher, which is an opportunity to send your work there. Like, we like it, but it's not quite there for us to say yes. There was an agent attached that if I got that deal, she would be my agent. I thought it was all going to work out. And then it didn't. They did not like the revision I'd made enough to pick it up. And so I went sort of back to square one. So then I wrote 6, 7 more novels. Henry Tudor Must Die was the second to last one. I wrote a rom-com after Henry Tudor Must Die. And over all of that time, I was querying not a ton of agents at a time. So that was a total of, let's see, what do I have? 11, 12 books. Um, and I was querying maybe, 10 times per book, maybe 15 for some of those books. And I think I put some numbers in here. About 30% of the time, I was getting a full manuscript request, which is one of the really wonderful things you can get from an agent, which is sort of the sign that they like the pages you sent in and they want to read more. So that was really encouraging. But also, about 40% of the time, I got no response at all, not even a rejection, just silence. And that's not uncommon either. Agents get, at this point, especially with the rise of AI, thousands of submissions every year because people can now just press a button and create a book, which is not a real book, I will say, but and they send that on. And so agents have to wade through a ton of stuff every day. So don't take it personally when you start querying, or if you're querying now and you aren't getting responses. It's literally just they can't survive under the weight of all of that email. So, oh, I guess I should go back to that little heading there, but expect to be rejected. And that's okay. I mean, I don't think there's an author alive that on their very first book, the very first time they sent it out, they got an instant yes. I mean, there might be a few of those, but it's really uncommon. Everybody is sort of like, oh, you went through 150 queries. Most of the authors that I know went through 100, 150, 200, 300. So it's really not strange to be in this position. And while it is disheartening to get those rejections, it isn't even necessarily a huge, uh, I guess, influence on how you keep going. Like, you will get people that will give you real feedback, but sometimes the feedback is literally just, this isn't right for me. And so that's not something you can control. Every book is subjective. The experience that anyone that is reading a book is subjective. And so you need to sort of just keep believing in what you're writing and what you're doing and face those rejections. And I can say that now, having stopped being rejected for a little while. But I definitely didn't believe that the whole time. There were many times where I would cry and shout that I'm giving up and slam my computer shut. And I did give up for 2 full years. For 2 years, I didn't write a book, I didn't query, I didn't do anything because I was tired of being rejected and it hurt. And I have very thin skin and I didn't like it. And so I think being able to push through that, having people in your corner to cheer you on as you're writing and that like your writing, friends, family, people on the internet that you've met, I think that's great. And I think knowing that you're going to have to maybe write one or two or three or 11 books going in and not feel like that first book, especially, is the one that you're going to completely sell and be married to forever, because in most authors' experiences, that's just not the case. It can happen. I can't say that it won't happen, but I think if you go in with expectations a little bit lower and a little bit aware of the reality of some of the harder parts of this, it does help get through. And then the other piece of advice that I have just in the early stages before you really even get going is to find your process. So my writing process is, I work a full-time job and I'm not a morning person. So I'm not the person that gets up at 5 a.m. to write 1,000 words. I wake up at 5 a.m. I'm like, I have to go on an airplane. That's the only time I'm getting up at 5 a.m. or the cat's yelling. So I think finding out, are you a night owl or an early bird? When do you work well? If you get to work in the day, great. I don't have that option. So for me, I'm sitting in the evening in my writing chair. This is after dinner, and that's when I lock in. And I think knowing, the first thing I have on here is a plotter or a pantser. And a plotter is somebody that creates an outline and works through their story kind of piece by piece. And you don't have to follow it always. Your characters will always do something a little bit different that you don't expect, but you kind of know beginning, middle, and end and where you're going in between. A pantser just sits down and writes, and whatever comes out is what comes out. And I really admire those people, and I am really not one of them, because I would lose the thread instantly. And working in historical fiction helps because in Henry Tudor Must Die, I know I've got characters that are real people, so they went through real things. I can pull all of those experiences in, and I can move from, all right, the book starts with Anne Boleyn's execution, or lack thereof, and moves all the way to when we may have another execution of the other titular character of this book. So I know that I want to go all the way through that. I have historical pieces that I can pull in, but if you're writing contemporary or fantasy, you have to really make it all up. And so knowing whether you need that sort of outline and that structure, or if you can just go by the seat of your pants, I think will be really helpful. So then The goal setting element of writing too is something that a lot of different authors have different ways that they do this. One of my favorite authors, Susan Dennard, she writes toward what she calls her cookie scenes. So they're the scenes that she wants to just gobble up and sink her teeth in, and they're like the best salted chocolate chip cookie you can imagine. And she knows that not every book has cookies the whole way through. If it was, they wouldn't be as sweet and wonderful when you got to them. So she knows where those are going to slot in her book, and she writes toward them. She uses them basically as a reward to keep going toward that. So for me, I do more of like a long-term goal, short-term reward situation. So I'll say, okay, this month I want to write 10 or 15,000 words. And I know I've got, 30 days to do that, and I can work toward that. But every day that I hit, like, I'd made today's goal of whatever it was, 1,000 words, I give myself some sort of little reward. That doesn't have to be like a physical item, but it can be like, okay, I get to watch 10 more minutes of New Girl tonight, or I get to work on my side project, because you always have to have a side project. And while you need to be focused on the one that you really want to get out there, sometimes popping into another world is a really helpful way to adjust your creativity flow. And I work with other writer friends, and we will do sort of, we call them accountability buddy writing. So we will say, this is my goal. It could be somebody wants to get through a full series of edits. Somebody wants to write a certain number of words. They want to figure out, a big problem that they're struggling with in their book. And then we cheer each other on. So at the end of every day, we check in and say, okay, how'd you do today? Did you make your goal? And then everybody gets stars and heart emojis all the way through. So that is a really helpful thing to have somebody else, that's in the trenches with you in writing. And then the final piece on here is, how can you work on your book every day? So it doesn't have to be that you are sitting down and writing 1,000 words every day. Some people do that, and I really admire it. But for me, some days, especially after a long day at work, I am just drained. I can't sit down and create. And so those are the days where I will work on writing the synopsis, because you always have to have like a 1-page synopsis for a 100,000-word book. And I don't know how you do it, but eventually you do. There are times where you could work on your social media. You could be working on building your website. You could just be picking out a character's name. Whatever you need to do to just be in that space a little bit. You could go back and read what you wrote a day or two before and edit it and make it feel a little bit more polished. So finding a way to do a little bit on your book every day, I think, is a way to keep you connected to it without it feeling overwhelming and stressful. Because I'm learning, and writing my sophomore novel can be stressful, but the whole point of it, we do this because we love it, right? It's joyful, it's fun, it's creative, it's all those good things. And so finding ways to make sure it stays that way for you, I think early on, are super important. Oh yes, we've got a question in the back. Leanne, yes, and please raise hands, interrupt me at any point. Yes.
When you work on your novel after dinner, how much time do you give yourself? Or is it just like
before I fall asleep? Real problem. So how much time do I work on my novel after dinner? Usually, honestly, my goal is to be, it's like literally, I'm in my chair. What I say to myself, I want to be in my chair by 8. And then I usually text my husband around like 9, and I'm like, I need 15 more minutes. But for me, like after like 9:30, my brain is mush again. So I'm really working in like a very small window of time, which means I'm not one of those people that could write 3 books a year ever, because it just doesn't exist. I can write 1 book a year. But yeah, I think, and for me, it takes a minute to get locked in too, to like sit down, figure out where I am, start. If I only have 15 minutes, I convince myself I can't possibly do anything. Don't be like me. You can do something in 15 minutes, even if it's just editing or working on those little pieces that I mentioned earlier. So for me, I think any amount of time is good. I'm trying to be a little bit more flexible with myself, of if I only have a short period of time, I can still create in that time. So, but yeah, also find more time. I don't know how to do it, but I haven't figured it out, but I'm working on that. Mainly I'm making my husband make me more dinners. So thanks, Craig. We love Craig. Everybody, a round of applause for Craig. Craig's the best. Yay. All right, so speaking of Craig, my #1 beta reader, who has literally read book 2 4,000 times at this point and is rereading it for the 4,001th time right now. Well, not right now. Right now he's sitting here. But beta readers or critique partners are people that will read your work as you're going through it. So it might be in chunks as you're writing. It might be when you're all done with a first or second draft and you want them to give some thoughts and opinions. And what I have found is that it's useful to have different types of beta readers for different reasons. So, like, I go to my mom and I'm like, Mom, just tell me you like this. And that's what she'll do. She'll find typos, she'll do other things, but she will just be like, this is the best thing you've ever written. I love it so much. And I'm like, thank you. I just need, even if that's not true, I need to hear that sometimes. I can go to my other author friends and be like, I am stuck on this plot point. I really need like folks to dive in with me and figure out how do we move past this? How do we make this make sense to the story and make sense for our characters? And then there are other people, friends and family, who have different sets of skills, whether it's in writing or in something else, and they can find different things in the story to help me move it through as well. So I kind of listed here those, you want those brainstorming partners, somebody you can take a walk with and say, this is what I'm thinking, like, does this make sense? And what if I pulled this in? And you can just walk and talk and build that out. You want people that can get in there with you, like people that have writing and editing experience and help you with that editing piece or with those plot pieces. And then you just need your cheerleaders, because I will tell you, the Goodreads people, some of them aren't your cheerleaders. And when your book is published, you're going to really want to like remember the nice things that your mom said when the Goodreads person is like, oh, I didn't like it, 1 star. For no, I'm like, but why? Could you tell me more? I can fix it, I swear. So I can't. It's published. It's done. But anyway, yeah, so I think looking for people like this, the library is actually a fantastic place to find people to make writing partners of. I think other places that you can find, you know, a lot of our bookstores have writing groups or book clubs where you could meet folks. There are also online groups. And then I did list there are editing services if you want to get a little bit more technical. Readsy is one that I always recommend. That is staffed by people who have worked in the publishing industry and are now freelancing, and they do all types of genres. They do picture books. They even can help with illustration and marketing, all kinds of stuff. So it's a really robust system. And then there are book coaches, and that's somebody that you're going to pay a fair bit of money to help coach you through the writing, and they'll set goals with you and help you get to where you want to go. They can't promise you, you know, a book deal or anything like that, just as nobody can, but those are other options that are out there too if you really want to kind of dive in and get that professional assistance as you're going through. So then kind of we're going to jump ahead just to, you know, when you are writing, I always say that the very first thing and the very most important thing is your first chapter. Makes sense, right? That's the first thing anybody's going to read. And if you've ever picked up a book at the library or the bookstore and you read a couple of pages and you're like, this isn't for me, you put it back. So you never want somebody to go, not for me, and put it back. You will, that'll happen. But most folks are going to really start judging, especially if they're shopping for the book, by that first little snippet that they're reading. And that's the same for agents and editors. They're going to look at those first pages. Most agents have you send between 10 and 25 pages or 1 to 3 chapters to get a feel for your writing and whether or not they're going to like this book. And we sort of do the same thing on the editorial side. You'll get sample chapters to look through and see if it's something that's going to be a fit and if you want to read more. So the one that I always use as my favorite example is the first chapter from The Hunger Games. Who has read The Hunger Games? Okay, if you haven't, go check it out. I don't know if it's got a hold. If it does, get your name on the list. The opening line is, when I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. So instantly you're wondering like, oh, who are you waking up next to? And it's not who you think it's going to be. And then within that chapter, which is only 17 pages long, I believe, with actually rather large type. So if it were smaller type, it would be shorter. The stakes that we get, we understand immediately. Katniss is our main character. She lives in a world that feels a little bit like ours, but a little bit unfamiliar. You can tell that something bad has happened in a world that used to feel like ours. And we understand that there is this thing called the reaping that is happening, and that's going to be bad and scary, and that kids are going to be going into this Hunger Games situation. And we know that she has a responsibility to her family. In that first chapter, she goes out and hunts and checks her traps and is walking through town and kind of getting the feel for this really gritty District 12 life. So you're also getting the setting. You are in a totally new place. You don't know if this is modern day America, if this is America at all, if this is a fantastical world, what happened, but you're starting to see these pieces come together that make it feel familiar enough that you're like, okay, I can ground myself in this space. And then the chapter ends, sorry for the spoiler for anybody that hasn't read it, but that her sister's name is called at the reaping, which means her sister is going to go into the Hunger Games where most people die. So the first thing you're going to do then is go, oh my God, and then turn the page. Like that's what you want to inspire when you're writing. And not every chapter can possibly end with a cliffhanger. It's just not something that any of us can do. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe somebody can do it, but it's really difficult to do. But I think especially in that first chapter, ending in such a way that makes the reader want to turn the page with whatever it is. It doesn't have to be this gasp moment of Prim's name being called, but it has to be something that you're like, okay, I've gotten enough information about the character, the world, and what's going on that I need to find out what happens. I need to go to this next chapter. So that is, I think, the biggest thing. If you're going to be putting a lot of energy, I mean, your whole book should be lovely and polished, but put a lot of energy into that first chapter because it really is going to sort of be your make or break. It's the equivalent of judging a book by its cover. People judge a book by its first chapter. I do remember the best compliment I got last week when my book launched was that one of my English teachers came up to me and she was like, I judge a book by its first line. And I was like, oh my God, just the first one. And she was like, and I liked yours. So that was good. I think it is her execution was set for dawn, which is actually untrue. Anne Boleyn was supposed to be executed at like, I don't know, like 8:45. It was very casual. There wasn't really like a set time, but I was like, I'm not gonna be like, yeah, her execution was gonna happen sometime before brunch. So I made it a little bit more dramatic. Speaking of shiny first chapters, shiny titles are another thing, and that's something that I've experienced myself. So when I started with Henry Tudor Must Die, it began first as To Kill a King, and then it became Killer Queens, giving a Queen band reference. And I can't say that the reason it didn't get picked up the first time I sent it out had anything to do with the title. I didn't get that feedback specifically. But then one of my friends and beta readers was like, well, what if we called it Henry Tudor Must Die? As a joke. She said it totally as a joke. And I was like, no, you're a genius. Because what that title does is it instantly connects you to John Tucker Must Die, which is a cult 2000s classic. It gives you sort of this sense of being irreverent and modern and accessible. It helps that the title is also hot pink. I think people can pick that up as well. But you also know who's in this book, our boy Henry, and what might happen to him. And so it is a little bit of a spoiler title. But I think titles that can do a little bit of the legwork for you, especially for readers who are inundated right now with options, whether it's books, movies, TV, games, give them something that like catches their eye and connects a couple of dots in their heads. I think that helps build a little bit more rapport instantly and a little bit more reason for them to pick it up. And the same goes for an agent or an editor. Titles do change a lot throughout the process. Mine luckily didn't, but when I was working as an acquisitions editor, we regularly were changing titles or trying to find ones that we thought would do the most good and the most sort of, I guess, marketing work for the book. And so don't feel like if you don't have the most perfect title in the universe from the start that that's a problem. But I think building up a title that can do some work for you is a really useful thing to do. And then we're going to transition a little bit here out of writing and into querying and preparing to talk to an agent. So this little slide here, do your comp research. So comps in the biz are competitive or comparative titles. So those are books or movies or TV or other forms of media that are similar in tone or in audience or in plot to what you're doing. So for me, I had Six the Musical. So I picked a Broadway show. I had My Lady Jane, which is a fabulous book and a very good television show that tragically only got one season. The Other Boleyn Girl, a book also made into a movie. Inglourious Bastards, a movie by Quentin Tarantino, which was my husband's suggestion and people always laugh at, so I love that. And then The Great, which was a TV show. So within that, when I sent this out, I was immediately kind of giving enough information to the agent and then after that to the editor about what the vibe of my book was like. And so when you're picking comps, I always say, like, don't be like, it's like the Odyssey. Because, I mean, you can say that it has, there's mythology that comes from these worlds, things like that, but nobody's really like the Odyssey. You're not like Homer. And so I also say, don't say that, maybe you are, let's just keep using The Hunger Games as an example. Like, very few books are The Hunger Games. So you have to kind of dive in a little bit deeper and find some comps. I always say find ones that are recent. So in the last 5 to 10 years, because that shows that there has been interest recently in them. And then ones that are still popular and that they're selling well. There are lots of ways that you can check this, if they're on the New York Times bestseller list, if they are on the hot read shelf at the library, if they're just kind of showing up in the zeitgeist a lot, I think that's a really good sign. But I think too, picking ones that are realistic and true to your book. Like obviously you want to pick things that show that your book has the opportunity and, the legs to get to where some of these books are. But it's also just hard sometimes for an agent or an editor to look at something and being like, this is the next Twilight meets Hunger Games meets the Odyssey, and that's just, it's kind of too big of a swing to make. So picking things that are fun, cool, realistic, and doing well would definitely be my recommendation there. And then when you are pitching to your agent, your future agent, we'll call them that, pick the right person. So there are a lot of great resources online, and this is what I used. Manuscript wish list is totally the way to go. That is where most agents will list their wish list, what they're looking for at that time, the genres that they're working in, the age groups that they're working in. They usually will list some of their own favorite books that they've either worked on or read, so you can get a sense of what they like. And then you can also see they will often list other things like favorite bands and TV, and like kind of give you these other opportunities to connect with them on a personal level. Um, Agent websites also have a ton of this information. So you can always go, I say, pick up a book that you really love, turn to the back, and see if they thanked their agent or their editor in their acknowledgments. And you might want to pick up a pen and write that down and then go onto their website later, because that could be somebody that could be a really good fit for you. And then there's also sites like Publishers Marketplace and Publishers Lunch, both of which require a subscription. But they show deals that are coming through. So they actually will report, Jillian Laine's Henry Tudor Must Die sold from Liz at Macintosh and Otis to Sarah at Berkeley, yada, yada, yada. So you can see what agents are selling and what editors are buying. So that's really helpful too if you're really starting to figure out, okay, where is my book going to fit? Who do I want it to go to? And you're starting to think about maybe where you want to pitch to editors down the line. So then when you do your pitch, the big thing is, and this was when I was an acquisitions editor, huge, to show you've done your homework. So spell their name right. Anybody that calls me Jill off the bat, I'm just like, no, no. My name is Jillian. It's everywhere. It's in my email signature. I'm like, hi, I'm Jillian everywhere I go. I'm not Jill. So that's a big one. Spell their name correctly. And then make it personal. So I think a lot of the reason that I got my agent was I was querying just before the inauguration, and on purpose, like it was after the election of 24 that I was like, yikes, I want to return to this book about women taking power back. And so I did. And so when I was querying, I was like, hey, if you're feeling really scared and hopeless like I am, maybe you're going to like this very cathartic book. And so literally my agent like wrote back and was like, oh my God, give me this. And so that was, I think, finding ways to like either connect to the present moment or to connect to that person. If you've done your research and you've seen that they love, your favorite TV show or they love your favorite band. And I mean, don't be creepy about it. Don't be like, I know you live at 123 Broadway. But just kind of make that personal connection. Make sure that you're mentioning the items from their wish list or the books that they work on or other things that they have said publicly that are easy to access. And then last thing on that, always follow the submission guidelines. It's really tempting to do other things, to send more or say more, but if they say send me just your query letter in the first chapter, just send your query letter in the first chapter, because a lot of times they will just disregard anything that does not follow the rules. So, and then I also put on here, don't follow up. It's tempting to do so, and some of them will say on their website, if you haven't heard from me in 3 months, you can follow up. That's fine. Then do that for sure. But otherwise, it's just adding to this email inbox. And a lot of times, like I said earlier, a no response is just a no, and you kind of have to take that as it is and move with it, which sucks. And it would be lovely if everybody could at least let you know for sure. But tragically, that's not the way that it works a lot of the time. So this was my agent's wish list. She was looking for transportive historical fiction, speculative alternative history, and dark and dry humor. So that worked out perfectly for me. So looking for things like this that really fit into what you are writing is definitely going to be a way to get you well ahead of the competition in terms of pitching. And then the last thing on this sort of the pitching side of things is just to pitch a few agents at a time. So don't send it to everybody that you want possibly to be your agent at once, because you might get information from those agents if you get rejections or you get acceptances from the start. So I learned, some things along the way about how to better personalize or how to better pitch myself or how to rewrite, how I was talking about my book and make it kind of feel more fun and exciting for people. So use those rejections if you do get feedback in them to tweak your materials, to maybe go back to your beta readers and say, hey, I got this feedback. What do you think? Does this seem like something that makes sense for my book that I could do? And then I also think the last thing I have on here is time. So if you go and you pitch all 50 of your favorite agents in the world and it's not the right time for somebody, maybe they're closed to submissions, maybe they just picked up a book that's kind of similar to yours, maybe they are just super overwhelmed and they can't get to it right now, it's just not going to work. So making sure that you are being really intentional about this, because sometimes you only do get the one shot. So you want to be very thoughtful about how you do so. I'll pause for a second here before I go into sort of the publishing and editing side. Are there any questions on querying so far? Yeah, go ahead.
You have the whole book written.
Do you have the whole book written? Yes, if it is fiction and you are a debut author, you must have your entire book written. The only time that that is not the case is if you are famous. Then you only have to have a couple chapters written. If you're writing nonfiction, there are agents and editors that will take what's called a book proposal. And so in that case, you sort of have an outline and a synopsis of what's going to happen. You have a couple of sample chapters, and then you maybe have a really detailed set of notes of where things are going to go and what's going to be included. But yes, if it's fiction, the whole shebang. So, yeah.
When you receive rejections.
How often do you get feedback when you're receiving rejections? I would say a quarter of the time. So not often. A lot of times you just sort of get a very polite, like, thank you so much, this was not right for my list. But I would say occasionally, especially if it did resonate with somebody, they'll say, I really like this, but things that I would hear, especially on Henry Tudor Must Die when I first queried, where we don't see a place for historical fantasy on the shelf right now because it's sort of a genre mashup. And I was like, well, I can't do much with that. Like it is what it is. But I've had people also say like, I would love to see more from you. I liked your writing, but this book isn't a good fit. So you'll get probably stuff like that is maybe not completely actionable, but does, give you a little bit of direction. And then sometimes I did get one or two people that were like, I really loved, the characterization here, but I felt like the ending didn't have enough of a payoff or something like that. So then that is something that you can actually take back and use. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think of self-publishing houses like Arch?
Sure. Yes.
Something and they sent me this email back telling how great it.
Yeah.
They hit me with a 6 different things starting at $4,000 up to $12,000.
Sure. Yeah. So I can't speak too much on self-publishing because it's not the route that I took. But I think it's an incredibly valid option. I think whether you're doing, there's sort of self-publishing and indie publishing are kind of two different terms that do slightly different things. Self-publishing and working with a place like Archway might be a little bit more that you do have to, pay and invest, with them. But there are some services that they offer as well, which are nice. Whereas an indie publisher is sort of more of like, these are a lot of those writers that are publishing straight to Kindle, straight to Nook, and they are basically their own marketing, or they're hiring folks, their own marketing, their own publicity, their own author. So there's a lot of different ways you can go. And for me, I knew that I didn't have the skill set to do it all myself. That was a lot. You will learn a lot of that along the way. I've learned way more about Canva than I ever needed to know, but I knew that I wanted to work in traditional publishing. So I think self-publishing, definitely explore the options. There are some out there that I do think are kind of predatory, but I think there are some out there that are really good and also really believe in books and want to do good things. So unfortunately, I don't have great advice on that, but I think Reddit probably does.
Agents.
No, they pay me. Yeah, and hopefully I earn it back. I guess so in traditional publishing, an author receives an advance, and it can be anything from, I think probably the low end right now, depending on how small the house is, could be $1,000 to people that are getting millions and millions and millions of dollars. And you get that advance, and that's sort of like the payment for your book so that you are writing and doing the work. And then when your book goes on sale, you start earning royalties. And I only earn like 10% on every book sold, so it's not a lot. It's going to take me a long time to earn that money back. But the idea is that you eventually earn out your advance and your publisher is made whole, and then you, the author, start making money off your book. So I would say it's not uncommon even for authors to never earn out. It is not uncommon for it to take years. I'm expecting it to take me a couple of years to earn out, just based on how numbers work. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure. So yeah, it's a definitely lots of different ways that you can go through the publishing sphere from different entry points. Yeah. All right, so I just have a few quick slides here. When you are going on what we call sub, you will be working with your agent. We're assuming you got an agent because we're going to be really positive and proactive about this. But you will work with your agent to figure out which editors are a fit. So the good news is any agent worth their salt has a ton of connections. Look for people in the business, whether you can have a brand new agent. There's nothing wrong with working with somebody who's new, but you want them to be at a house that has deep background and has a lot of senior agents that will know people, because somebody who's new is going to be hungry and they're going to be working hard and they're going to be pushing for you, and that's great, but they also may not have all those instant connections. So if they're working for a agency that has a long history and they have a lot of people that have those connections, it's going to work out great. If you can find somebody that's a little bit more mid-tenured, that's fabulous because they've already built that. So don't feel like when you get an agent, you have to do all the work of figuring out which publisher you're going to send to and which editor you want. You will have somebody in your corner that's going to do a lot of that thinking for you. Like I mentioned, you can always check in the acknowledgments and look for folks, because a lot of those editors seem to exist in these magical New York buildings and we don't know who they are and what they do, but they are real and they're lovely, and you can find them in the acknowledgement sections, usually nowhere else. They're usually pretty quiet otherwise, or you can find them at conferences, but definitely you can do a little research on your own. And then the thing that I recommend the most is actually researching the publishing houses. That's a little bit easier. So there are big houses, small houses, everywhere in between. The questions that I found myself asking were, how do they handle artificial intelligence? Because that's a hill I'm going to die on. I do not want my book being fed into some data polluting horrible machine. More on that later. But how do they handle AI? Because a lot of publishers are embracing it in ways that I think are very harmful to authors and don't compensate their authors. Do you agree with their ethics as a company? Like, do you think that they're publishing books that you would stand behind? If you were like, yeah, I'm published by Penguin Random House, do you feel okay saying that? Do they have any other issues that might be problematic? There was one publisher, who shall not be named, that I told my agent, I was like, no, I would rather not have a book deal than have them publish this book. And they're a big player in the game, and I was just like, nope, I wouldn't want to do that. So you may or may not have lines to draw in the sand, but I did. But then the thing that's also really important is, are other authors happy there? And you'll get to start to meet other authors. You'll be able to see from their social media, from their talks, like what they're saying about their publisher. And if you're getting the sense that like, yikes, this isn't going well for them, pay attention to that. But most people luckily have pretty good experiences, so you can learn from that as well. And then when you go on sub, you have no idea what's going to happen. I was really lucky that it went quickly, but we sent to 8 editors in the very beginning. And within the first week, 2 people were like, oh, thanks, but no thanks. Fine, you're going to get rejected at every stage. But then Berkeley, which is where I ultimately made a deal, they, within that first week, said they wanted to make an exclusive deal, which meant I could not entertain offers from anybody else, which is a really interesting spot to be in. On the one hand, it's lovely and you're like, great. On the other hand, you're like, well, what else is out there? It's a very grass is greener situation. But Berkeley was a house that I loved. I have so many books on my shelf that have that little B, and so I knew that that was one I wanted to be at. And the editor that I got was actually somebody who I went to school with. We didn't know that about each other at the beginning, but we figured out, like, wait a second, like, weren't we in this same thing together? And so we had a lot instantly in common that made it feel really lovely and well connected. And I knew the authors that she worked with were very happy with her. So it could be a total crapshoot. A lot of my friends go on sub for months and months and months. I'm sure that when I go back on sub, So right now I have a 2-book deal, and after that I'm going to have to do this all over again. And I will go back to Berkeley first, and if they say no, then I have to go out wider and ask more people, like, please, will you buy this book? And I know that I'm going to get rejected along the way. It could take, on my 3rd book, it could take a year. I could be told no on that 3rd book and have to write a 4th one and hope that one sticks. So it's a very tricky business. But when you are out on sub, the things that I always was thinking about were, what is a number that I hope for in advance? Literally, I was like, if I get $10,000, like, I've done it. So like anything over that was gravy. The format, whether you're going to be hardcover, paperback, ebook, what that's going to look like, if there will be an audiobook, and then what the publication date and timeline was. So like that question we started with, how long is it going to take to get this book out into the world? What's the working relationship going to be like with that person? Always ask both your agent and your editor, how do you like to work? Are you an email person, a phone person? Are you really editorial and hands-on, or are you a little more hands-off? And then what's the marketing and editorial vision for the book? And because I didn't have a lot of conversations with editors due to the nature of this deal, I didn't really get to play this game as much, but I know folks that have talked to, 3 or 4 different houses, and some people have entirely different visions of what the book is going to look like. Some people are like, it's going to be this huge, like, bestseller upmarket smash. And some people are like, it's going to be this, like, underground indie cult sensation. And it's going to be, we're going to focus really more on, like, the characters here. We're going to focus a lot more on the plot here. And so you kind of at a certain point have to decide, and again, this could happen with your agent as well, what feels true to you and what you want to do with your book. Because, yeah, you do want a book deal and you do want all of these things, but at the end of the day, it's still your book and you have to believe in it and be true to what you're writing. And then the thing that I will finish with here is the multi-book deal, because this is where I'm a tiny bit of an anomaly. I think it's not uncommon to have a multi-book deal as a debut author, but it's becoming a little bit less common because right now publishers are watching the market. They're trying to figure out what's smart, and sometimes investing in 2 books for a virtual nobody is a little bit dangerous for them, economically speaking. But if they see that there's a series or companion novel potential, that helps. So I always recommend, if you have another book in the back of your mind, to make sure that that is part of the conversation. Sometimes they want to spread out the advance over multiple books because that helps that money go a little bit farther for them. If your genre is really popular, so I think horror is doing big numbers right now. Romance was the hot thing. It's maybe, getting a little bit saturated right now. But if that's happening, they're like, okay, this is the time we're going to invest in this, we're going to go. And sometimes they really just believe in you. Some publishers are just really nice and they think you're going to do it. And so they will give you multiple books to prove them right. But yeah, like I said, always have that extra idea in your back pocket. And I had when I was working as an acquisitions editor, one of my favorite authors, McCall Hoyle, she came to me with a book that was beautiful. It was so lovely and so well written, but it wasn't totally a fit for what I was doing. And I said, hey, send me your next book. I want to see this, when you've written something else. And we went on to do multiple books with her. And then she got this great kind of spin-off career writing these amazing books. If you have a middle grade reader in your life, look up McCall Hoyle. She has these adorable, heartfelt books about dogs that are so funny and so great. They're all from like dog perspectives, which I loved as a kid, so I love it as an adult. And so, yeah, always be ready to have that other idea because you might get the opportunity to put it into real life. And then the last thing I have here is to know your timeline. If you haven't written those books, like I had not written book 2 when I just had a pitch when I got this deal, know how long it takes you to do that and what it's like to write under pressure, because I had never written under pressure before. I had written for me at my own time, at my own house, in my lovely writing chair and my cat. And now I'm writing with like one agent devil on my shoulder and an editor devil on my shoulder. They're all angels, I should say, not devils, but they're telling me things. And then I have this other book that has just come out that I'm like, okay, I need to promote this. I'm also trying to do my job and be a human being and sleep sometimes. And so knowing what that feels like and what's actually reasonable to you and what would feel good and exciting, and not just like, oh my God, well, yeah, 2 books instantly. Yes, done. I'll do them back to back. I'm learning that that's easier said than done. So learn from me as well. And that's it on the slideshow. So we'll just kind of pop into Q&A. I didn't talk a lot about, the Tudors. So if anybody wants to bash Henry VIII, I'm here to do that. But I'm also happy to answer any questions about this process.
have one question from our online Zoom audience. They wanted to know if you had any suggestions or comments for those who are interested in writing nonfiction and memoirs.
Ooh, all right. So writing nonfiction and memoirs. Well, I have not done it. So I'm not sure I have any fabulous advice other than to look at the versions that are hitting the bestseller lists right now. I think it's really cool to see a very wide array of nonfiction on the bestseller list. I love when I see a really quirky memoir and then I see this like amazing political piece. And so seeing what is resonating with audiences would be my biggest thing. And not that you can always tailor your own story or your own experience to fit that, but I do think that it helps to know what's working and then work toward a version of that in that space, because it is really competitive. Especially I would say memoir is really hard to break out if you are not a famous person. Nonfiction, you've got a lot more options. People are curious about a lot of different things, but memoir especially, I would say, right to that kind of the cool audience that you're seeing buying books right now.
Your traditional publisher, how much marketing do they do for you?
So how much marketing does a traditional publisher do? It depends on the publisher. So I had sort of a publicity and marketing team. So the marketing team did a lot on like the side of, they found ARC reviewers, so early advanced reader copy reviewers, especially folks that were very active on social media, and they were sending early copies out there. They helped me make fun things like I have a quiz, which queen are you? And then they did a lot on, like finding places like shelf awareness or bookshop.org, where we could either have ads or we could get placement for the book, or, I could write pieces for folks. And then the publicity side, they do more of just the like complete, we're pitching to every outlet that there is. And so I would say that, every book has similar marketing parameters. Everybody wants to get in the New York Times. I did not. But I think it depends on the house. It depends on the book where they go. But I would say a lot of it does still fall to the author. So, you do expect in traditional publishing that you have that team and they're great and they're doing it. But in this day and age, a lot of it does still come down to me being on Instagram posting pictures of my cat that are like, buy my book, cat. And so that it actually works. Stu is my best marketing tool. So okay, I'm gonna just go one and then okay.
When you're going through that process of writing a book, you query, you get rejected, so you move on to the next one. How do you know when it's time to like, okay, I'm gonna move on to a new project, give up on this? And how do you know when to kind of accept that rejections are part of the process and I'm gonna keep pushing and try to find the right person?
Yeah. Okay. So when do you accept that rejection is part of the process and you keep going? And when do you realize that you're being rejected for a reason and you need to move on to the next one? Great question. I think for me, a lot of it was like fear. I think I probably gave up too fast. I would say it's not good to give up until you've gotten maybe 15 or 20 rejections, for sure. Maybe it's 50 or 100. It's kind of, how do I say this? I think it's hard to know when the time is right. If you have gotten concrete feedback that something isn't working, then yes. But otherwise, it really has to do with like what those rejections are doing to your confidence in terms of that book. So that was sort of what I decided usually was, this rejection is making me sad. I'm going to work on something else that will make me feel better. So it was sort of like a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid, as I'm like bleeding out from sadness. So I don't know, that's fine. I have a therapist. It's cool. But yeah, so I think you have to go by your gut a little bit, but I do believe in writing the book that you believe in and the book of your heart and not giving up on that. I did give up on this and luckily I came back to it, but I think it is all too easy to just be like, oh, nobody likes this, there's no point. Whereas somebody liked this and there was a huge point. And if I had just given up and not tried again, this book would have been still just gathering dust, at my house. So yeah, no concrete answer there, but I think you'll know. I think you'll know when it's time. Yeah. Okay, sorry, we had one. You had a quick one, yeah.
I think the publishing world is, anybody buy poetry?
Oh, does anybody buy poetry? I mean, there are still lots of anthologies that are published, poetry, like full collections from a single person. It is harder. I would say fiction and nonfiction dominate, and then probably memoir, and then probably poetry. So it is a little bit trickier, but yes, there is still definitely a market for it. Yeah.
You'll go back to any of those other 11 books.
Oh gosh. Oh, will I go back to any of those books? No, I think there are one or two that I like and I believe have some legs. A lot of them, when I look back, I'm like, I understand why this was rejected. So, not that they're not bad. They're just, I was learning, and I, especially because I hopped around from genre to genre. So I wrote, the first couple were YA, some were YA fantasy, some were contemporary. I did sci-fi. I didn't ever do horror because I'm a scaredy cat, but I did some adult stuff. I did like a mythological retelling. I just tried a lot of stuff, trying to find something that worked for me and worked to get published. So now that I'm in a world that feels like comfortable and good, I don't know exactly where I would go from here, but I definitely have some that I would like to go back and read. My husband and I actually, we were laughing because we wrote one together one time that we literally sent to one agent, and they were like, thank you, but no. And we were like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. We'll never go back to it. But he read it recently and he was like, this was adorable. So I need to go read that and see if that's true or if he was just being nice. So
So I want to get back to that marketing thing.
yeah.
Is your publisher, are they pushing the bookstores or are you pushing?
Yeah, so who's pushing the bookstores? A lot of that does come from the publisher. So I definitely like to do events. I'm the one that goes out and I say, hi, I'm Jillian. I would love to have an event, or even at the library. Like, I'd love to do something here. But the publisher does sort of like the sell in. There's always an opportunity for the author to do that, but the publisher does the main push to the bookstores, the Barnes and Nobles, the Targets, etc.
So you're on Barnes and Noble, but that doesn't mean you're on Barnes and Noble in the store.
Correct.
Because I have that same problem.
Yeah.
If you go into the store and say, hey, we could take my book.
Yeah.
They look it up, and if you're on a group publishing, they say fine.
Yes.
So you have to do all that. But
yeah, and Barnes and Noble, I mean, that's an interesting case because they're a huge chain and they're always shifting what they're putting on shelves and what they're putting on tables, and shelf space is shrinking all the time. So yeah, I would say with the BAMs, the Barnes and Nobles, any of those big physical retailers, there's never any guarantee. I actually have no idea which Barnes and Nobles, if any, I'm in store in. I can find out, like I can ask, I can say, dear publisher, am I in here? And they will say yes or no. They will let me know for sure. But it's not like, especially with those big chains, it's much harder for the author to influence anything versus going into indie bookstores and making connections and asking if, will you carry a copy of my book? So, yeah.
Are you going to stay with historic fiction?
Ooh, will I stay with historical fiction? For now. I obviously 1 and 2 are. The third one that I have written that hopefully my publisher will like is French Revolution time. So feels appropriate for the year 2028. And so I think I really like it. I love the structure that it gives me. I like going back in time and giving, all my stories are about women who had sort of tragic stories, and giving them agency and power and sometimes magic. And I think it helps me contextualize history because I always like learning about it, but it sometimes feels really far away. And when I can make it into my own little world and a little more modern, I learn something, and that makes me feel like a better citizen of the world. So for now, yes, historical fiction's where I'll be.
When you were creating agents, did you know and have views from your time is as a editor, or do you feel like you were just
Yeah, so did I have connections from my editor time? Yes, but I was so afraid to use them because I didn't want to be like a Nepo baby that I would never be like, I would list in my bio that, I worked at whatever it was, whether it was Sourcebooks or HarperCollins, and I would say that, but if I met an agent, I would never try to use that connection because it just felt sticky to me. And that was probably me being very Midwestern and scared to rock the boat at all. I think that's probably fine for other people to do. I would not say don't do that. I think for me, it was just I was scared of making people feel like I was taking advantage of the professional connection I had to make a personal connection. So, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I probably should have just chased down every lead I had, and I would have been here like 5 or 6 years sooner. So, yeah.
How far along during a novel did you think about like the comparative novels or movies, like, and also like I was just worrying, like, you know, does that kind of, if you're thinking about that kind of pretty early, well, focus on your own original work, does it kind of start to affect you too much, where I'm like taking on too much of this other influence?
Yeah, so yeah, when do you start thinking about your comps and do they have undue influence? I definitely don't read books about the time period I'm writing about when I'm writing, because it's so easy for something to like start sneaking in there. So I won't read any Philippa Gregory right now. I won't read, you know, Alison Weir right now. When I take a break, like I will go back to those books and read. But yeah, and then I think with your comps, I think from an early stage of your book, you'll probably have a couple of ideas because you're probably just naturally influenced by things that you like and that will start to appear just in your brain. You'll be like, oh yeah, like this is kind of like X, Y, and Z. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I don't think until you've, you know, really completed the manuscript, you know you want to query it, you know it's ready to go. You don't have to be thinking about that until that point. But I would keep track. Like I would keep a little, you know, notes app of like, oh, I saw this book in the store and it had like very similar, you know, like thread lines to what I'm doing, and I really love this movie and it has some of those same vibes that my main character has. And so you may not find that those play out all the way through once you're done, but it can be helpful to be keeping track as you go, because then you're not sitting down to a blank Microsoft Word document and being like, okay, what are the books that are like my book? So you'll have a little bit in your back pocket.
How did you like having a pen name, and why did you choose this?
Yes. Well, I chose a pen name because I want the bad guys to have a little bit more trouble finding me. So a very real thing in this world, unfortunately. But I chose the name that I did. It's my first and middle name, and those are the two names that my mom gave me. And while I obviously have championed my husband very much, and I also really like my dad, those are boy names. And so I wanted my two girl names for my girl books. And it does make it a little confusing. I've had to learn to sign a whole new name. I'll probably mess it up a lot. I so far have not introduced myself incorrectly, but I will do that as well. But yeah, I think so far it has been okay. Yeah, and I like it. I've had those names the whole time. Those have never changed as other names have come and gone. So those are the two that have been with me the whole time.
Do you use particular software, you know, like, or like you said, a Word document, like do you really just have it as a Word document? How many places do you have it backed up?
That's for real. Yes. Yeah, no, I literally just do Word. I'm super old school. Word that I won't update because it has new AI features, so it's probably going to crash out on me soon. Yeah, I know a lot of people that use like Scrivener, people that use Google Docs, stuff like that. I do back up. I've got like 2 external hard drives. I also email myself copies and email them to other people, and I'm like, this still exists somewhere. It won't be totally gone. But I should back it up more. Honestly, I worry about that a lot. Like that keeps me up at night of like one morning the other day, I woke up and my computer had restarted overnight and I was like, why? What happened? Did I save properly? And like, luckily, yes, I had. Everything was fine. But yeah, I have never tried any of the other. There are so many cool pieces of software and like literal machines that people use. But the thing that I do is I'm just in Microsoft Word and I usually turn off my Wi-Fi unless I need to be doing research while I'm writing, because otherwise the internet calls to you and you're like, oh, I'll just check my email, I'll just check Instagram, and then all of a sudden you've wasted that one precious hour of writing time that you have. So I turn that off, and then when I am like, okay, but what would they actually be eating in 1553, then I will like open it back up and check. So yeah. All right. Oh, one last question. Okay.
Do you skip around as you're writing, or is it kind of from back and then how does that?
Yeah, do I skip around? Most of the time I write pretty chronologically, especially because this book and the second one have multiple points of view, and so I need to make sure that they're meshing from one to the other, versus if I just had one character's voice that I was using, I could probably skip more. But I did in other books that I've written. And I like those cookie scenes I was talking about. I will sometimes be like, okay, I really know what this is going to be, and I don't want to do the yada 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 to get there. And so I will go and I will write the like ballroom scene where everybody's in their masquerade and like who is who and what's happening, or I will go and like write the execution scene because I can picture it in my brain. Sometimes I mean I do believe if you have a vision and a picture for something, like do it while you can do it, while strike while the iron is hot. But yeah, I do it a little more chronologically too, because it keeps me focused and keeps me honest, and I'm not just writing the fun things as I go. So, oh yeah.
Did you write any short stories before?
Oh, short stories. No, I would have no idea how. I wrote terrible poetry for a very long time, all through high school and college, and then yeah, went straight into this. I admire people that write short stories, because how do you do it? Like, I have to keep trimming mine down and making it shorter. I don't know how people get a whole story into like 10,000 words. Crazy to me.
A little self-serving here, I will admit. Can you talk a little bit about the role of the library in any of your writing?
Library. I love it. Great question. Well, I was a definitely total library kid to start. Back in my day, when we were on 6th Street instead of in this beautiful fancy building. That's where my grandma would take me for story time, and so I grew up at story time there. And then my school library was a public and school library, so they had all the books in the world, and I very quickly wandered out of the children's section into the grown-up section and found a lot of things that terrified me to my core, which was great because it taught me a lot. It taught me what I like to read and then eventually what I like to write. And then my favorite library, that is not this one, obviously, but was the reference library at the University of Michigan, where I didn't actually like usually check anything out, but I would go there and sit and write the aforementioned terrible poetry in those chairs, or do my homework sometimes. But yes, I think libraries as a space to learn, to love, to read and write, a space to do things like this, a space to have the quiet place that you can go and write. Like if I didn't have my reading chair slash I didn't have to drive 20 minutes, I would be here way more often, tucked in a corner in a little nook with my headphones on, listening to my very quiet Ludovico Einaudi music and be writing away. But I think the actual thing that has been maybe one of the most exciting things was I just learned this week, because my mother-in-law told me, that there were so many holds on my book here that you guys got another copy. And so that was really cool. Yeah. So yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, because I mean, that's huge. You believe in me and people that want to read it. That's crazy. So yeah, I think that's a perfect place to end, as it is 7:01 p.m. So thank you guys all so much for coming. I'm going to pop to the back in a minute, and if anybody wants to buy a book and have it signed, I've also got cards and fun stuff back there. So thank you, and here's to the library.